Did you guys know that Mighty Morphin Power Rangers has a comic book? And it's amazing. It's so cool. They have like this character named Lord Drakkon, and like there's, dude, this story, man, this, man, let me tell you something. It's good, man. It's really, really good. Okay, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. I grew up on Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. And I will say until the end of time that Green with Envy is the best little mini series in the Power Rangers TV show ever, right? Like literally the Green Ranger beat the crap out of all the other Power Rangers. Here's the whole thing behind this, right? All this really focuses on Tommy, at least this first video that we're doing here, right? Focus on the Green Ranger, this focuses on Tommy, right? So here's a crazy thing. I mean, there's a much bigger plot going on behind this whole thing, but this is kind of like a bit of a view or almost kind of a concept or an idea that if Tommy stayed under the spell of Rita Repulsa when he was originally introduced as the Green Ranger, that he would have done exactly what we saw him do in Green with Envy. He would have crushed the Power Rangers, rightfully so, because he's the Green Ranger, and all the Power Rangers suck compared to the Green Ranger. So like we would have seen that happen, right? And that's kind of what you see play out here. But what you end up doing is actually kind of jumping to reality in the moment. Now, this immediately follows, I wouldn't say immediately, I'd say within like a time period, right? It's like a few weeks essentially, but it basically follows the whole idea of Tommy basically being freed from the influence of Rita Repulsa and then being inducted full on into the Power Rangers. And so you kind of have him hanging out with Jason, right? Which makes sense, right? Jason and Tommy were like the two guys. Like we kind of know what's going on with these two dudes, but one of the things that kind of goes on here is that in the aftermath of Rita's involvement with Tommy, that Tommy gets these hallucinations with Rita Repulsa, where she just kind of pops up and she'll just sort of influence him or talk to him, right? Almost kind of tear him down. And that's a kind of mainstay of the character, right? Of Tommy himself, is that he's always dealing with this idea from like these Rita Repulsa visions that like she's telling him like, you're not good enough, right? Without me, you'll never really be a good Ranger, right? You'll never be up to your full potential or anything along those lines. It really is like all of his self-doubt kind of given form in Rita Repulsa. And so following that, what you actually end up getting, while they have their school stuff, whatever, nobody cares about the Power Rangers when they were in school, right? Like, nobody cares. I remember watching that show and it was like, okay, now we're going to switch over to the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers when they're in school, like they're in class and they're hanging out and doing math. And I was like, I don't care. I want to see them fight like the putties, man. Like action boy now, action girl now. It was a cool song from a terrible movie, but the whole thing about this is that you kind of have this moment where they all basically band together, right? It's Morphin time. You guys know the whole thing. And they kind of jump into the fray against like this massive monster that's basically just ripping the place up. And what you end up getting is kind of this cool moment where you have like the Dragon Zord who's called in, you've got the other Zords who call in, they form into the Megazord, and the Power Rangers kind of do their thing, right? The big caveat to this is that while all that's happening, Tommy's Zord is not functioning the way that it's supposed to. It's not responding to his commands, which is a huge deal, right? Like when you've literally got a monster that's the size of a skyscraper just ripping a town apart, and you need like all the Rangers to respond to it, they've all got to be able to operate at peak efficiency. And it's one of these things where like the weak link in the chain will lead to the ruin of all. And so that's when things really kind of become hairy and they start asking questions. What's going on with Tommy? And the initial response here from Tommy is, well, my Dragon Zord just froze, right? I don't know what's going on. It's got to be some kind of a glitch or something along those lines. Billy or Alpha 5 or whoever it is, somebody take a look at it. Let me know what's going on. And that's kind of the crazy thing is Zordon chimes in and says, okay, but like it doesn't necessarily work that way, right? That when it comes to the Zords that you guys wield, that the Zords really kind of require a bit of involvement on your behalf. They have to be able to trust you. Now, Zordon kind of chimes in and he actually brings into this whole thing. If you guys recall in the original series and in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the original TV show back in the day, that there wasn't a whole lot known about the Green Ranger, right? The Green Ranger coin, the whole thing that gave Tommy his powers, that it was essentially something that was almost unique to Rita Repulsa. And Zordon didn't have a lot of knowledge about it. Her involvement with the Dragon Zord is extensive, and it's one of the things that he says, but for the most part, he can't really offer a lot of options here. It'd be different if it was the Red Ranger, or the Blue Ranger, or the Yellow Ranger, or the Pink Ranger, or even the Black Ranger. It'd be different if that was the case because Zordon could have a lot more influence there because, you guys know the whole thing between Zordon and the Rangers. But when it comes to the Green Ranger, there's as many unanswered questions as there are answered questions. And so not having a full totality of the understanding of what's going on here really presents a few complications. The other part to this is that Rita is constantly trying to find a way to sort of expand her power. But one of the things that's going on here with this meeting between Rita Repulsa and Scorpina is Scorpina had kind of been sent on a mission by Rita. And what you kind of have here is what's called a chaos crystal. And so what she's basically done here is acquired a crystal for Rita Repulsa. That's something I want you guys to keep in the back of your head because that's incredibly important. But from there, you basically jump to Bulk and Skull. What you kind of have here is really this statement that's offered by Jason with regards to like people's perception of the Green Ranger. And it's one of these things where it's essentially known at this point that Green Green Ranger single-handedly dismantled the other Rangers. And now that he's fighting alongside them, there's a lot of concern and a lot of worry. Like, should we be worried about a former villain turned hero who's fighting alongside the Rangers? Is it a ruse? Something along those lines? And the response that Jason kind of offers here, again, sort of keeping his identity as a Ranger secret, is, well, if the Rangers trust him, we should trust him too. It's kind of an interesting thing, because what you're going to notice going on here is that in a lot of ways, there's a lot of distrust when it comes to Tommy. That you even have these kind of discussions that are going on among the other Rangers when Tommy's not there, which is, I mean, can we really trust him, right? I mean, this guy was seemingly picked out of nowhere by Rita Repulsa, dropped into our laps, beat us within an inch of our lives, destroyed pretty much the entire base of Zordon and Alpha 5. Like, literally, if it hadn't been for this guy, we never would have really known we could be defeated. You know what I mean? Like you guys remember that? You guys remember Green with Envy, right? I mean, he trashed them. He trashed the Rangers. It was the coolest thing. But that's kind of the question they're left asking here, right? Like, this guy was a henchman of Rita Repulsa. Can we really trust him? Because we still don't really know anything about him. Like, we still don't really know. And that's one of the kind of conversations that happens between Zach and Jason even, is Zach is just kind of like, hey man, like, did you really believe the stuff that you were telling like Bulk and Skull on that? And he's like, well, what are you talking about? And he's like, I mean, this idea that like Zordon never even really asked us how we felt about bringing Tommy on board. He just brought him on board as a Ranger. But in all honesty, and that's one of the things where Jason kind of just deviates to the wisdom of Zordon, it's almost X-Men-esque in that way, right? Like, Cyclops' inherent belief that Xavier knows what he's doing and he's always right turned out to be wrong, and that's why Cyclops defected. It's kind of the same way when you have like Jason and Zordon, right? That Jason trusts Zordon. He trusts the experience and the wisdom of Zordon, and he kind of leans into that and says, well, Zordon didn't really know anything about us, right? We were teenage kids with attitude, right? I mean, that's basically what we were. And he trusted that we could be effective as Rangers, and so why can't we trust him when it comes to Tommy? But Jason has reservations, man. And so what you end up doing is kind of switching to this bit of a moment here where you have like all these putties and like this torn, worn down city, a giant monster just leveling everything in sight, just ripping it all to pieces. And so you have Tommy, who's tasked with this role to basically take these people to safety, right? These innocent individuals to safety. The problem is that as he does that, he ends up leading them down what is in effect a trap, right? It's essentially this kind of hallway or this corridor where they're just surrounded by putties. While all that's going on, he's got Rita Repulsa whispering in his ear, telling him things, right? It won't be enough. It's never enough, right? Like you led these people to this place. You know, you failed when they counted on you, like all that kind of stuff. Like, you're never going to be an effective Ranger. Only for us to find out it's a training simulator. Now, this is incredibly cool, right? Because at this point, I would even say Zordon is a little weary about Tommy. But the thing about this is that the training simulators are not really just for Tommy, right? It's not one of these things where it's like, hey man, we don't really trust you, dude. So like from now on, you're just going to be hanging out in the simulator and we'll just see how you respond. Instead, the simulator is designed to test them as Rangers and to really kind of force them into these positions where they have to face mortality. And this particular simulation focused on the idea of a no-win situation, right? It's the Kobayashi Maru for the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, right? A no-win scenario. Instead of Tommy hacking the system and cheating, like Captain Kirk did in Star Trek, he chose what he thought was the best decision. The reality is that had he chosen the other road, he actually would have led them directly into the face of the monster. But the whole gist of this, and the reason why it's so important, is because there are times when as a Ranger, you are going to have to face certain defeat, right? You are going to have to face the fact that you might die. And the whole idea behind the simulator is to, one, understand you're not going to make the perfect choice every single time. And two, when that happens, you're going to have to be able to face the consequences of it. You're going to have to deal with it as best you can. It was really a moral fortitude test and really a kind of courage test for Tommy. What was he going to do in the face of disaster? Was he just going to panic and cry? Was he going to just, keep fighting for as long as he could? And he responded in seemingly the best way he could. The other part of that is you end up having Trini and Billy, who really just kind of analyze the whole thing, right? They analyze the Dragonzord to figure out what's going on and all that kind of good stuff. So not a whole lot going there. Billy does his usual thing where he's like, I don't know if I'm really cut out to be a Ranger. People don't really like me all that much, and it's like, Billy, get it together, man. Like, you're a Ranger, dude. Come on. Like, I mean, see, I personally couldn't be a Power Ranger, man, because I'd be using that to get laid like all the time. I'd just like show up in my Power Ranger gear and just be like, hey girl. The funny thing about this is that once Tommy gets back to his place, he's immediately met by the arrival of Scorpina. Now that's kind of the crazy thing here, is because Tommy makes the right move just like that and actually teleports Scorpina away. Now, this is one of the big issues that Tommy deals with here. And the reason why is because as soon as he and Scorpina are in this field by themselves, he morphs into the Green Ranger and then goes to fight Scorpina. Notice here, he does not contact the other Rangers. And that's a big problem, because whenever it is that you're a Power Ranger, you're inherently a team, right? Like you fight as a team, you do your thing, you hang out as a team. That's one of the things that was kind of built and really established when it came to the Rangers. I mean, they did everything together, right? Like they ate lunch together at what was maybe the cool kids table, I don't really know, right? But like they ate their food together, they hung out together, they would like go shopping and stuff like that together. And even if it wasn't like the whole group, it'd be like Kimberly and Trini, right? Or like Jason and Zach, or like Billy, Jason, and Zach, or something along those lines. But like they would all go and do stuff seemingly in some form or fashion as a team. Tommy is very much isolated and very much a loner. And that's a very important thing for his character, because all he really knows in relation to the Rangers is for the most part betrayal, right? I mean, granted, he was being manipulated and controlled by Rita Repulsa at the time, but the reality of this is that the Rangers still don't fully trust him. And so it is kind of on him to try to demonstrate that he is a trustworthy individual. And doing things like this, right? Like just jumping into a fight with one of Rita's, really one of her most dangerous henchmen, is a pretty big thing when you're not calling the other Rangers in, right? I can deal with it on my own. I don't need you guys. And while there is something to be said about having the courage to face your struggles on your own, there's a big difference between doing it because you have to and doing it because you choose to. And Tommy is choosing to ignore his teammates here and do this on his own. And that's kind of the crazy thing, is because you end up having this great big huge thing where like putties are called in and they end up facing off against all the putties and so on and so forth. But then Rita basically chimes in. You kind of jump over to her for a second. And the idea of Scorpina being here is twofold. First and foremost, if at all possible, get the power coin away from Tommy, right? Like get it from him and then bring it back to Rita. That's the best alternative. That's like the main mission here. But shy of being able to do that, get Tommy to expend as much of his energy as possible, because the crystal that Rita has is powered by it. Like literally as he fights, it powers the crystal. And that's kind of the subversive motive here, right? It's the one thing that's kind of not being made aware of, right? Where, I mean, you have Scorpina who's like, give me the power coin, you know, that kind of thing, but she's not really saying like, keep on fighting, because then you'll expend your energy and then we'll be able to power some crystal that we made somewhere. But the rest of the Rangers seemingly jump in here, right? You have these other Rangers who kind of jump in, right? The Red Ranger, the Pink Ranger, right? They all just kind of jump in, as best they can. And it's cool to see them all kind of teaming up. But at the end of the day, like Rita is still chiming in to Tommy, right? She's still talking to Tommy, still being kind of subversive and offering these words that really sort of tear him down, that kind of a thing. The other question that kind of comes here, really comes from the other Rangers, is why didn't you get a hold of us? And the whole thing about Tommy is, no, I was blindsided, okay? Like she showed up in my house. What was I gonna do? Like I just teleported her away and that was basically it. But again, the role of the Rangers is to be able to think fast, to be able to analyze the situation and leave emotion out of it. And Tommy basically seems to lack that ability. That's really what seems to be going on here. He's very much a loner, very much doing his own thing. He's not really used to operating as a team, and it's showing itself here. And so the result of all this is that as Rita keeps chiming in and really kind of bothering Tommy, even while he's there with the rest of the Rangers and their base of operations, that ultimately it gets the better of him and he seemingly just passes out. And so what he ends up having here, or at least what he ends up experiencing, are almost kind of like these visions and hallucinations. Now, some of these are really more like premonitions, more so than hallucinations or anything else. But the thing about this is that once Tommy kind of comes to, the dream that he'd had is that he'd basically been taken home by the Rangers and dropped off at his house. And his mom's like, oh, it's okay. And it's cool. You have such great friends and Power Rangers even. Wow. And then it just kind of blows Tommy away. It's like, you're not supposed to know that, right? You're not supposed to know. And then of course she rips her face off and it turns out it's Rita Repulsa who's still screwing with Tommy's head. And that's kind of the crazy thing about that, is because you jump to Rita herself. And that's when she says, we really kind of get this explanation where it's, while Tommy's not necessarily under her direct spell, that seemingly the powers he possesses come from Rita. But by whatever manner and whatever means, there's still a bridge there. And so she's seemingly still able to manipulate and to kind of influence Tommy. Now again, a lot of that is just for the idea of always trying to get him to come back, always trying to reel Tommy back in again. But the important thing here is she basically kind of tells Scorpina, the whole idea is that as Tommy continued to fight against you and against whoever it is that he's facing off against now, the green chaos energy that he emits will basically fuel this crystal. And at the end of the day, we'll be able to open a portal, which is exactly what they've been shooting for. And there's a reason why they're looking to open this portal, because it's a great concept, right? It's a great idea. But what they end up doing here is, in order to force Tommy to expend even more energy as much as they possibly can, they come up with this idea to basically create what is in effect a forged dagger or forged key that will allow them to use the Dragonzord. Not only that, you have Trini, who actually runs a kind of mental scan on Tommy. The problem is that in the middle of this mental scan, suddenly like he experiences this vision where the Dragonzord goes nuts and just destroys the entirety of their base of operations and everything, right? Like there's nothing they can do. Like it all just gets ripped apart. apart, the Rangers and the whole 9 yards. And then suddenly Tommy comes to, right? Like Tommy just wakes up. And that's kind of the crazy thing, is because when Trini goes to check the energy scan of Tommy, she comes to the realization something else is going on. And so what ends up happening is she actually calls all the Rangers back to their base of operations, and then she presents it with the information, right? And she says, okay, so this is when Jason got his body scan, right? His mind and body scan, essentially his energy signature, right? A power scan, as they call it. This is what he looks like, right? This is what Tommy looks like. Somebody is messing with Tommy's powers. Somebody is influencing Tommy. And they don't know that Rita's the one who's doing this. And so when the question's like, okay, like, can it be somebody like Rita? Like, can somebody be doing this? I mean, that's the immediate thought, right? She's the one that basically created him as the Green Ranger. Why wouldn't she be the one who's involved? And when they kind of ask him, like, hey man, like, have you been in contact with Rita? Is that kind of what's going on, man? Tommy spills the beans and says, initially it started off as flashes, right? In the corner of my eye, I'd see a blip of Rita Repulsa over there, or I might see her off in the distance or something like that. But the more things went on, the more I began to see her regularly. And then the more I began to experience her talking to me, tearing me down, telling me all these things, basically taking all these feelings that I had about myself and bringing them into the surface, and really saddling him up and forcing him, really kind of stripping away the confidence that he has and what he's capable of. Now, when the most obvious question is asked, why didn't you tell us? The response of Tommy is, I was trying to handle it. But this is a really important thing to understand here. One of the big differences between Tommy and the other Rangers is all the other Rangers, quote unquote, grew up with this, for lack of a better word. They didn't really grow up together in the traditional sense, but it's really more of the thing like they all became Rangers at the same time. So they were discovering their powers, and it really forced them to bond in a way that Tommy just hasn't done yet, right? I mean, they were learning what their Ranger powers were. They've got their own home lives, their own struggles, and they learned quite quickly that in order to operate at peak efficiency as the Power Rangers, they had to be in unison, right? Mind, body, and spirit. They had to operate in that way. And so a lot of what would normally be those social hierarchies that exist among, high school kids, a lot of those things that would be those kind of mental barriers that sort of keep them from revealing those parts of themselves, how they feel, or their struggles or family lives, those were eliminated very fast. And so there was a very strong closeness that was built between all the other members of the Power Rangers. Tommy is just here. And so now that they don't really trust him, because when they first met him, he just trashed them all, rightfully so, because the Green Ranger is better than all the other Power Rangers. When that happened, it built a lot of mistrust. So much has happened so fast that there really hasn't been a chance for anybody to kind of catch their breath and figure out what's going on. Not only that, you've also got Scorpina, who manages to use the Forged Dagger to actually take control of the Dragonzord and then start like trashing the town, right? Like just ripping everything up. Now, the other Rangers respond and actually start dragging it back into the water, but that's when like another monster is created by Rita, which offers as a distraction to basically keep the Power Rangers from focusing on the Dragonzord. Enter Tommy in one of his coolest moments here. What you end up getting is this whole situation where Tommy, who's more or less being kept away from the other Rangers and being kept back in the base of operations, kind of watching everything unfold, is doing so because, for the most part, as he's facing these hallucinations, they consistently get the better of him. And so you have this really great moment where this kind of personality of Rita Repulsa, as is influencing him, is saying things like, they were always going to find out, you can only fake it for so long that you're a normal person, but in the end, you're no hero, right? You're not a hero like the other Power Rangers. You're the villain. You're the bad guy. You're the wolf in sheep's clothing, right? Like that's it. Like you were never going to be anything great. And ultimately, Tommy overcomes it and says, no. Like, I used to believe you were real. I used to think that you were actually tangible, but no, you're just all my self-doubt, right? You're all the self-doubt that I have, my insecurity that's wrapped up through all my dragon powers. Like, you are everything that I dislike about myself. But in the end, you're still just me. This is Tommy coming to grips with himself. And if only it were so easy for us as people to see some tangible manifestation of every negative emotion we have about ourselves and then overcome it so easily, right? If only that were the case, life would be so much easier. If only it was possible for us to just have some, physical version we could just pummel. But Tommy does. And as he comes to terms with that, and as he starts to realize, no, right, I am capable of being a hero. I was under Rita Repulsa's spell when I did all these terrible things. But what the Rangers need right now is not some guy who's struggling with self-doubt. They don't need some guy who lacks confidence in his capabilities. They need the Green Ranger. They need a guy who's going to defy all the odds and even break the rules if it means saving their life. And that's what happens with Zordon. Zordon's like, no, right? We can't really trust that you've gotten past these hallucinations. And the response to Tommy is, dude, I don't care, man. Like, I don't really care about your stupid rules, you blue floating head. Like, I don't really care about that. It's Morphin time, right? Man, I'm sorry, I'm so excited, people. It is an exciting story, right? It's cool. It's a really cool moment here, right? Guy jumps up, like grabs his dagger, man, starts, you know, and that's the thing, man. Let me tell you something, man. In all the years when I was watching Power Rangers, that's when you knew shit was about to pop off, right? Like it's just like I remember, like you don't even know Tommy's there, right? It's just like things are popping off and things are getting kind of nuts, you know, and it's like, oh, Tommy's coming, man, like Tommy's gonna save the day, you know, and like here comes the Dragonzord and the day gets saved. It was always kind of a cool thing, right? And so literally he basically seizes control of his Dragonzord again. He basically fights off Scorpina, right? Manages to defeat her again, expelling a little bit more energy here. But once he basically comes out on top, and once he's able to basically destroy the fake dagger that she has, and then replace it with his real one, then that gives him control of his Dragonzord again, right? And between the two of them and the Megazord, you know, defeating the giant monster, then that's basically it, right? The problem is once they get back into the base of operations, Jason lets Tommy have it, right? He's just like, I don't know how much more clear I could have been. I appreciate that you wanted to just break the rules and go out into the field and save us from this imminent danger. I really do appreciate that, but understand, we can't trust you, man. Like, we don't, like, one, like, you tried to destroy us when you were under the spell of Rita, and you almost did, and then now that you're not under the spell of Rita, you were thrown onto the Power Rangers team. We didn't even have a choice of whether you were gonna be here or not. Then you were hallucinating and you were seeing shit. Like, and what, we can't, there's nothing about you that we can trust right now. But at the end of the day, he's just kind of like, no, right? Like, that's it. Like, this is it, right? I mean, either you have me here or you don't. But I'm not playing this game of like trying to bounce between your rules and your standards and all that kind of stuff. That's not how this works, man. I just saved your lives. So if you guys have a problem with that, then like you end up having this kind of situation where Zach gives him, you know, ends up giving him grief, and it's just kind of like, you know, when he's like, dude, like, let go of me. He's like, well, what are you gonna do? You're gonna go all evil Green Ranger? And that's enough right there, right? That's enough of it right there. Because the whole time they're there, Scorpina's tied to a chair. She's watching all this unfold, and then something catches her eye as Tommy gets more and more angry as he keeps going on and on and on, and even starts to get into a fight with Jason. The crystal in that dagger is glowing, right? It's glowing. It's charging up. It's powering up. And ultimately, when Tommy goes in for it, goes in to attack Jason, that's all it needs, right? Like, the thing is fully charged. Literally, a portal rips open and just blows out the side of the entire base of operations. And in what is probably the entrance of the greatest character ever in the history of Power Rangers, in the history of the whole Power Rangers mythos, a black Dragonzord appears, right? And it's just like, what's going on, Power Rangers? I've been looking forward to destroying all of you for a long time. Who wants to go first? With that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this to an end. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know if you want to see more, and I will catch you all later. Peace.